The ANR inundation project was funded by the ANR and led by IRIT Laboratory. The consortium was composed of several partners: CEREMA, Enedis, INRAE, and SDIS 31. The project focuses on the management of flood crisis, more particularly flash floods, where it concerns several phases of the crisis management. It addresses short-term objectives that are during the crisis in the flood response phase, as well as long-term objectives for the purpose of reducing the vulnerability of the territory or in the anticipation phase. We have proposed a four-step approach relying on knowledge base that constitute the information system gathering all data about the hazard, the territory, and the response to be provided. The four steps of the approach are as follows. The first step is detection of the event, for example, a data from a field sensor indicating that the water level has exceeded the threshold. The second step is the analysis of its impact with the use of a hydraulic model that allows to know the flooded area of the territory. The third step is the decision stage, which concerns the safety of the population. It includes the planning of the evacuation process. Finally, the fourth step concerns the real action to be taken in the evacuation process, which are simulated in the project. Two territories were studied in the framework of the project: Bagnères de Luchon in the Pyrenees and the Argence in the Var. One of the contributions of the project was the construction of the information system gathering all the data from the institutional databases and the different metrics necessary for the crisis management. The hazard, the stakes, and the resilience are elements that allow analyzing the situation and deciding on action that concern the safety of the population. The information system is automatically designed in the inundation application according to the territory of study. A hydraulic model has been proposed, built, and then consolidated using observations, reconstructed hydrographs, and feedbacks. The hydraulic model is integrated into the dynamic four-step loop. It dynamically allows to calculate the flooded area on the territory from the input data provided by sensor or by predictions. In real time, the flooded areas can be re-evaluated. The image shows the result of a call to the hydro model in the Draguignan area. There are four evacuation priorities defined by the domain experts: evacuate immediately, evacuate in 6 hours, evacuate in 12 hours, and no evacuation needed. Our objective is to ensure the safety of the population during a flood. Evacuation priorities are assigned to demand points in the territory where a demand point is a location in the territory subject to evacuation. In this image, we can see the evacuation priorities are assigned to different demand points. For example, evacuate immediately is assigned for healthcare facilities. The flood-related data from different sources are integrated in an information system that allows reasoning over the data to infer an evacuation priority to each demand point according to its properties. Reasoning approaches can be performed using different scientific approaches. Semantic web approaches have been applied in the frame of the project in order to assign the priorities to demand points. There are three metrics defined in the project: risk, vulnerability, and danger indexes. The vulnerability index measures the vulnerability of a demand point. It is calculated using a topographic and social data like the population, the building's quality, and socio-economic conditions. The danger index measures the level of danger of a demand point, and it is calculated using the speed and the level of water obtained from a hydraulic model. The risk index of a demand point is calculated by multiplying the vulnerability index and the danger index. This is an example of a rule representing the evacuation priority: evacuate in 6 hours. It is composed of conditions set on different properties of a demand point, such as danger and vulnerability indexes, number of floors, and whether the demand point is inhabited or not. A demand point satisfying all the conditions of an evacuation priority is thus assigned this priority. The processing of a flood evolution uses the inundation information system designed independently of any crisis in order to describe the stakes of the observed territory. This description includes data extracted from institutional databases and calculated information, such as the vulnerability, the flow level, the concerned population, the socio-economic condition, etc. This processing consists of several phases that can be individually adapted. First, the flooded area is evaluated. In the demonstration for Lucian, the previous flowcharts are used according to the sequence of the simulation. For the NAR2B, the hydraulic model masquerade is activated dynamically with the observed flow as parameter. In the second phase, the water level is estimated for the stakes in the study area. In the third phase, the danger index is evaluated by taking into account the water level in the study area. In the fourth phase, the risk priority index is evaluated by taking into account different parameters, including the vulnerability, the concerned population, and the floor level. In this project, the evacuation phase that takes place during the response phase of the crisis management was simulated. The evacuation of victims is known in the scientific literature as a vehicle routing problem. This problem has been mathematically modeled in collaboration with the DIS31 teams. Algorithms were thus developed in order to find the best routes for emergency vehicles with the aim of improving the global efficiency of evacuation routes. This algorithm used as input all the concerned stakes and their characteristics in order to make the best decisions, and they can be recalled dynamically to adapt the routes to the changing situation on the ground. Simulations were conducted using the Gamma simulator in order to evaluate the performance of the proposed solutions. This work can also be used in the anticipation phase in order to train the rescue teams on decision-making or after the crisis in a long-term perspective in order to evaluate the benefit brought to the evacuation phase by the development of an infrastructure. To demonstrate the operation of the simulation, we are using the Gamma simulator. With this simulator, we can launch the simulation model on Lucian. We can then observe the creation of graphic simulation elements that allow us to display different demand points where it is necessary to respond, the different routes that the emergency vehicles can take, as well as the vehicles themselves. We can observe at the bottom left the detail of the routes that have been calculated through the routing algorithm and display in yellow on the graphical interface. For the moment, we can only see certain demand points, which are the stakes receiving the evacuated victims in anticipation. To evacuate these big stakes, we use big capacity vehicles like buses. When the simulation is triggered, we can observe the vehicle following the calculated routes. We also see the number of rescued victims. Each time a vehicle leaves the demand point, the number of victims left to be rescued decreases. Similarly, each time a vehicle passes the warehouse, not D0 in green, the number of rescued victims there increases. We can also observe the logs of the rescue operation performed on the bottom left. Let's move a little bit further in the simulation. The simulated scenarios are composed of reference dates of the crisis and a corresponding reference water level or flow. On this date, the information system is called. The hydraulic model is called with the reference water level or flow, and the stakes to be rescued as well as their priorities are updated. After a few seconds of calculation, this update is completed and applied in the simulation. New stakes and the water levels in the flooded area are shown. The departure of a new type of vehicle from the warehouse can be observed. These are specialized vehicles and boats that will allow the rescue of stakes where the water level is now higher than at the beginning of the operations. The category of vehicles to be used for responding to a demand point is calculated according to the water level in the flooded area. The simulation of the routing vehicle continues, and the vehicles have been modified by a recall of the algorithms. With the help of the simulator, we can thus observe the different key moments of the crisis and the adaptation of the routing vehicles over time facing the evolution of the flooding, the arrival of new stakes to rescue, and the evolution of priorities. By zooming out, we can observe the different demand points on the whole territory and follow the simulation until all victims are rescued. In order to enrich the knowledge on the long-term trajectory of the territory's stakes in a flood context, several socioeconomic analyses were conducted. In particular, a quantitative survey was conducted between April and July 2019 on 10 towns in the territory of study. A total of 418 interviews were conducted. These surveys revealed that 50% have a raised ground level, but only 60% have adopted other protective measures. This indicates that there is evidence of adaptation in the buildings and that the area may have been affected by flooding, but that households do not wish to adapt further. The survey identified two main reasons for this: not feeling exposed, or that floods are rare. Furthermore, we tried to identify whether households were willing to invest in collective protection. The use of a contingent evaluation scenario made it possible to measure the will to pay for collective protection measures. The surveys shows that the household proposed to contribute between 91 and 94 euros depending on the investment, but this amount remained much lower than the real cost of a collective protection. Finally, these surveys revealed that the inhabitants had not received any advice in terms of adaptation from the insurance expert during their visits. We therefore considered investigating this question further. The question is whether properties are restored to their original condition after a flood or whether the flood can be an opportunity for individual adaptation, as the trendy concept of Build Back Better suggests. In France, buildings insurance is compulsory and is governed by the CatNat system, which guarantees a compensation in the case of a natural crisis. When a flood occurs and the property is damaged, the insurance holder must make a claim to their insurance company that mandates an insurance adjuster. The adjuster would visit the impacted persons, make an expertise, report to the insurance company, and the insurance company would then propose a compensation for the impacted persons, while they can accept the compensation and use it to make renovations. We were interested in the role of insurance expert because it is a profession that remains relatively unknown to the public and the scientific community, but it is particularly the adjusters who intervene with the affected people, making the reconstruction decision in the damage resolution phase. With the realization of about 20 qualitative interviews with insurance adjusters, we were able to show that although the adjusters have the necessary knowledge to judge the relevance of an adaptation, the CatNat procedure does not formally consider the adjuster's advice. The guarantee provided by the insurance contract in the framework of the CatNat is that of a return of an equivalent state to the one before the flood, often interpreted as a return to the same condition. Adjusters do not feel mandated to provide advice and prevention to disaster victims. However, such an advice can be given informally. Finally, a sociological analysis was conducted on the management of sediments in the study area, La Pique, in the town of Bagnères-de-Luchon. The flooding suffered by the territory in 2013 brought out a problem of sediment management. 10 qualitative interviews were conducted to retrace the social history of the hydraulic developments of La Pique. One of the contributions to long-term crisis management in the frame of the project is the proposal of indicators for land use planning. 3 indicators have been developed in the frame of a PAPI scenario. A PAPI scenario allows the study and implementation of actions over a long-term period to reduce the vulnerability of the stakes in the territory. The calculated and embedded indicator should allow to adjust the action program and to orient the priorities toward the most efficient solutions. The visualizations here represent the following elements: the number of people occupying single-story buildings that are highly floodable, and the number of people in sensitive institutions such as nurseries, schools, hospitals, or prisons. Another indicator that is visualized here is the number of road routes intercepted by hazardous areas for a person. An important aspect of personal safety is to be able to access sensitive areas first in order to provide information and ensure safety. The calculation of the indicator allows to identify the axes to ensure safety, here, for example, by road management. It is possible to characterize the constructability of a parcel in connection with vulnerability and on an aspect of resilience of the territory. This makes it possible to locate parcels that can be used to rehouse disaster victims. By cross-referencing parcel data with building information, we can determine which parcels are available for construction. Then, by cross-referencing this data related to regulations, it is possible to identify the constructability of these parcels. In order to enrich the knowledge base, satellite imagery provides a recent and objective view of the territory. Thus, it can be used to characterize and update information on issues that are not necessarily included in institutional databases. The extraction of this new object can be done semi-automatically using indices derived from imagery, which can be provided information on the height or nature of the objects. This processing is done using machine learning or, more recently, deep learning algorithms. Through this work, several contributions have been made to the crisis management. Scientific results have been obtained in terms of knowledge production, including surveys on the behavior of the inhabitants facing floods, historical and sociological analysis of the management of terrains, calculation of indicators, vulnerability, danger, and risk indicators. Machine learning and deep learning approaches have been applied to the analysis of satellite images, either to characterize the hazard or to characterize the stakes and complete the information of the institutional databases or to identify the vulnerability of the territory. Finally, a mathematical model for the problem of evacuation of people was proposed. A loop from the domain of computer science allowed to integrate the different sources of knowledge and prioritization and planning of the evacuation were realized. From an operational point of view, the partner entities deployed sensors on the electrical network. The hydraulic model was integrated into the dynamic approach for the crisis management. A simulator has been used to simulate the algorithm of vehicle routes. It is thus possible to simulate the evolution of the water level of the flooded area and the evolution of the evacuation of people. The simulation can also be used to evaluate the impacts of territory rearrangements to estimate if papier actions would have positive impacts. The project has resulted in several publications at scientific conferences or in journals.